Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. You're tuning into an episode of the Redefining Society Podcast, hosted by Marco Ciappelli. Let's face it, the future is now. We live in a hybrid analog-digital society, and we must stop ignoring it or pretending that technology is not affecting us. The line between the physical and virtual worlds has become a figment of our imagination. On it, we are continually performing a dangerous balancing act, juggling convenience, privacy, freedom, security, technology, society, culture, and even the future of humanity. There is no better place than here, and no better time than now, to muse on our relationship with technology and how to redefine what society means in this new age.
Black Cloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high-net-worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impacts of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io. BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com. Devo unlocks the full value of machine data for the world's most instrumented enterprises. The Devo Data Analytics Platform addresses the explosion in volume of machine data and the crushing demands of algorithms and automation. Learn more at devo.com.
And here we are. I think we are at the same bar. Bruce, I recognize it. It's an habit.
Yeah. The problem is there aren't too many other customers here.
I know. I noticed that.
I'm wondering if it's something that I said, or maybe the clothes I'm wearing, or something like that, because they don't seem to be coming in. So
right. I know. My question is there a silicon, a carbon, and a cell in there? Because that's the joke.
I don't know if they're in the bathroom right now. Maybe the carbon's in the bathroom, the silicon's waiting outside. The cell might be, I don't know, passed out somewhere. Who knows? So.
Who knows? Well, that's who we like to have at this bar, which in my case is not even the bar, and I don't even have a coffee today, so I broke that tradition. But I do have some water, so I'm copying you. I'm having the same, which is water.
I think I got my water here too.
There you go. Mine is in a bottle, but it's still water. So again, this is a Redefining Society podcast. It's a series that I already gave it away. It's called A Carbon, a Silicon, and a Cell Walks into a Bar. Sometimes one walk before the other. I figure I mix it up, but it doesn't matter. It's still the three of them. And the point is that it's because we talk about technology, healthcare, and society. And that's why I talk about society and technology. And your background, for those that haven't seen another one of the episodes that we've done before, is, and here's where you introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm Bruce Wiley, and I wear multiple hats. I cover healthcare and science for Forbes. I also am professor at CUNY, where I run a center that does a lot of AI, artificial intelligence research. We do computer modeling. So broad interest in how different types of computational technology can help health and healthcare. And I also write a lot about health. I'm a health journalist and science journalist. So there's no shortage of things to talk about. There are plenty of cells, carbons, and silicons, and all those different types of things. And one of the things that we do is we talk about some of the key news items over the past few weeks, and how they might apply to health in general, and how they might apply to technology in general.
That's correct. And sometimes we can find some good news. I don't know, good discoveries and improvement in the healthcare, in technology, and there's always then the other perspective that you can always turn something good in bad, and sometimes you can turn something bad in good, but that's tough. that stuff. So we were chatting before starting the recording that one of the big news right now, it's what's been going on in Hawaii, and with the big fire, and I mean it's pretty tragic. But we were thinking maybe to connect this conversation with that, and maybe with the role of technology, either in environmental change or in disaster recovery. And of course, I was thinking telemedicine and accessibility could be a help as well. I just throw it out there just because you did. So did you actually write something about it on Forbes?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, one of the topics that's been that I've written about on multiple occasions the past few months have been wildfires. So as all of you probably know, throughout a lot of the summer, we've dealt with the wildfires. When we say we in the United States, the wildfire smoke coming from Canada, and of course, Canada have been dealing with it more directly. But that's been a continuing issue, and it's a reminder that a lot of stuff is going on in our environment. We're having an increased, breadth of wildfires occurring each year. If you look at the data, and the severity of wildfires may be increasing, and then most recently, the really, really, really unfortunate situation in Maui, Hawaii, where now you've had more deaths from that wildfire. When I wrote an article for Forbes, it was at 93, and it's increased since then. And even at 93, it was really the deadliest wildfire in U.S. history over the past century. I think you have to go back to 1918 for a deadlier wildfire. And this one actually surpassed the 2018 Camp Fire, which is actually sort of an unfortunate name because, this is not just a campfire, but it's a campfire that affected Northern California. So it exceeded that death toll. So we're really at record, a record death toll with this Maui set of wildfires, and it's probably going to continue to grow. So that's one thing I covered this past week, and the death toll is only part of it, right? You've got the I don't want to say only part of it. It's a major problem, but you also have to look at things like, for every death that occurred, there's tons of people who got injured and people who got burned, or people who things fell on them, or they had heart attacks or strokes and all those different types of things. And then there's the destruction that occurred, like just billions of dollars of destruction. You're really messing up the entire ecosystem. There's plants and animals. So it's a huge disaster. So I covered that. I also covered something about microplastics, where they actually found microplastics in people who are undergoing cardiac surgery. So you've got microplastics in your heart and your blood, not from the surgery itself, but obviously from all the stuff in the environment. You have microplastics everywhere. So I think those are sort of two key news items that I covered this week. And they're both connected because they're environmental health stuff, right? They're, the status of the environment. And so you've got to really sit back and say, what are we going to do about these things? What are we going to do about these problems? And technology can solve a lot of problems if used correctly. So there's lots of potential opportunities for that. So that's one of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, well, it's also come to mind that, and I had a few episodes about this where we kind of get philosophical with other guests, expert in environment, and the way we can use technology. It's kind of like technology caused the problem, and technology is going to resolve the problem. So I actually wrote a piece called about a paradox of this, right? So we use something and then more of that to get back to where we were, maybe without technology. But then the question is it's going to be a net gain, or we're still like under? What's that going to be? Well,
yeah, I think one of the things to keep in mind is there's there's two general ways to let technology flourish, and I'm using that term flourish in quotes because that's not necessarily a positive or a negative thing. Flourish means it's just basically goes all over the place. So one is sort of this push technology where you essentially say, okay, you just develop stuff and then see what happens. You just push it out there. People don't necessarily say, I need this, but it just comes out there. So, we see this all the time. People then sit there and say, I really need Facebook. Like people aren't sitting there saying, I really need Facebook.
I wish somebody would invent Facebook.
Yes. You didn't sit there. I mean, people in the 1990s didn't sit there and say, my life is sort of incomplete. I've got all these things, but I really don't have a place where I can post all these photos and read what people are saying, all the time, right? It's just sort of happens. So that's example push technology. Example pull technology is you sit there and say, I have a problem and, it needs to be solved. Can we develop some technology to actually address this? And so the way I see it is, you're seeing these technology come out and then you sort of say, okay, what can we use it for? That's more push. And then we have all these problems. And are we actually developing technology to actually address these problems or adapting technology that we really already have? I don't think we're doing such a great job with that latter thing. We're doing it to some degree, but not to the degree that we could be doing it. Yeah. Because there are so many health problems. I just mentioned a couple of these problems, and these aren't just two problems, right? When it comes to like pollution or like wildfires, or there's so many parts of it. Like, can you develop technology that can better predict when it's going to happen and prevent it? Like surveillance technology or prevention technology. Can you develop technology can actually better deal with it or warn people about it? Or deal with the consequences, like healthcare and taking care of destruction and trying to mitigate destruction, those things like that. So we have to ask ourselves, are we actually doing enough of that?
That's a really important point, and then we can talk a little bit more in depth of what's been going on with the fire and what is still going on. I mean, I live in LA, so you just look around, you know that it's going to happen. It's that season. You look at Malibu, you look at and you're afraid because you know it's going to happen. But when you start seeing these things happening in Canada or in Hawaii or in places that are not so well known historically for that, that's got to be something going on. But what I was going to take a stab at is this thing about, I call it the blinking lights and funny noises. Like technology, oh, that's cool, let's do it. Yeah. Right? Yeah, it's an arcade. Let me play it. Let me put 50, whatever it costs now to play at the arcade. I don't know. People play it at home, I guess. But that's the thing. Like, do we just do it because we can? Or do we just, instead of stumbling in some technology, like, let's face the problems. Let's make a list. And I was talking to a futurist the other day. I just published the episode. He has a funny game called End of the World 2075. He works at Stanford. He's a researcher, and they study kind of like what you do, but with like risk model, very complex risk model. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the fact of how it's almost impossible to put stuff together when complexity arises. But there is also this idea of kind of try to minimize, maybe focus on the most important things. Maybe AI is not necessarily should be the big problem now, but there are other things that you give priority. So I'm simplifying the conversation. I invite people to eventually listen to it. But, even it's like when you look at this model that you do, I mean, you got to decide, well, maybe I can go in a lot of different ways. How do you pick where priority is? Which also bring us to what are really the priority in our environment right now. I mean, extreme weather, it seems to me it's pretty big problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no shortage of issues or problems when it comes to healthcare, public health, and those things like that. What was that? I can't remember what movie this is from, but someone someone said, "Don't give me problems, give me solutions." It's some famous movie with some famous actor, and I know that provides absolutely no context, but yeah, I still remember.
Ask it to AI.
Yeah, we can ask ChatGPT to just tell us what. But basically, yeah. So there's all these different problems, and the key thing to remember is that these aren't disparate problems. Many times they're actually connected, because a lot of things in health and population health and all these different areas are actually connected. And so there is a shortage of solutions out there, and there are things that can be used, even including things that are existing out there to address some of these questions. And I like problem solving because I think when you actually you have a problem, you try to address it and you try to come up with a solution. So I think we do need more of that, because sure, like coming up with neat, interesting problems. So when it comes to things like, for instance, changes in temperature, global warming, changes in the climate, wildfire risk, those things like that, we have some just very general ideas of what's, measurements of what's actually going on, but like we can get a lot more specific in terms of, where can we start preventing some of these things? Where are the real danger zones? How should people be prepared as a result?
But how do you, not only how do you pick a list of priority, but I feel like the problem is how do you put everybody in agreement on that? Because, we all know the pollution. We all know the carbon in the atmosphere, but then you go talk with the oil company, they'll tell you, no, it's not a big deal. We're losing jobs. We can't go into all electric because, there's a lot of job in the car industry with the engine. And you're like, okay, but it seems to me that we really need to address this problem. How do we get together?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we've actually done a fair amount in some of our work, which is helping people understand the magnitude and impact of the problem, not just from an immediate term, but like a short term, mid-term, longer term, and much longer term. So if you think about it, I many times use this example of like, a weather map, right? So you watch a weather map and you sit there and say, okay, a weather map will show you what's been happening, what's happening right now, and what's going to happen in the next day, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, et cetera. So you get some forewarning and some understanding of the impact. And, the weather map shows you what happens because you combine barometric pressure and temperature and all these things like that. And this is what happens, cloud formation, it's going to rain or other things like that. So one of the things is helping people understand what's the impact of a problem. Because many times people don't realize that. We did that with COVID-19, for instance. So when back in 2020, we wanted to give people a sense of, okay, here's the impact of COVID-19. Here's what's going to happen. Not just the impact in terms of cases and those things like that, but here's a potential impact when it comes to costs, productivity losses, direct medical costs, those things like that. Then you're really kind of tying economics with health measures, and then you can also tie things like what's going to be happening with jobs and all these. There's ways to do all these things, and I think one of the things that we struggle as a society is understanding. Like, for instance, if I sat there and say, Marco, I'm going to push this chair. I have plenty of chairs back here to push back here, I guess, but I push a chair. It's going to move, and I can see it move. Simple, straight, cause and effect. All right. But if you start getting more and more complex after that, people start to struggle, right? I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how much experience you are. When you have to think sort of several degrees beyond what you immediately see, it's hard to do that without help, right? You need help to figure out the consequences of these actions. That's why we as humans do many stupid stuff every day, right? We do stupid stuff. We are rude to people accidentally. We say the wrong things. We put people, like even people that we really care about, that we really like, we will say the wrong thing, and then it will kind of sometimes mushrooms, like because we just don't anticipate. We can't see what's going to happen. But this is a way where you can actually, you can get computer models to help you see what's going to happen. Because, that's been done in many cases. We've done it many times in health. And that provides significant value because then you can make better decisions. You can see, here's the consequence. So you talked about jobs. Well, you're not going to have the same set of jobs in 5 years than you do now, or even in 2 years, right? I mean, who could have predicted that some of these job descriptions that are popular and in some cases really high paying now would have even been jobs in the 1980s, right, or 1990s?
But this is history that repeats itself, because there were jobs before, the car, before other technology that they don't exist. Exactly. Cameraman. What's a cameraman? Go tell that to somebody in the 1800s. Cameraman? Yeah,
exactly. Well, if you went to like the 1920s and say you're going to do a podcast, it'd be like, what? Pea pods? What are you talking about? You're going to cast away pea pods? So, so society is always moving forward. Things are going to be different. And this is where you can actually harness technology to just get a sense of what might happen and, what are the potential effects if you do certain things.
And I think that's the key to connect with what you said. Like, can we drive this technology thing and this evolution, not our natural evolution, but the societal evolution, knowing and predicting, because we have the instrument now to do so, and we should have the brain to do so, and so change the course according to what we are able to predict. I mean, let's reconnect here. Weather model. I mean, we can tell when a hurricane it's coming.
Yep.
I'm not telling when a earthquake it's coming yet, but we're trying, and that would be a good thing, or a volcano eruption or whatever it is. In a way, I think that if you put enough variables into the equation, the model, you could see that, and we kind of know, look, the fire is really a big risk in this period of time. And you can look back in history and say, statistically, historically, this is going to happen. But it seems to me that we never really do enough. We kind of wait for stuff to happen.
Yeah.
And then, damn it, I should have.
No, we're very reactive. We can be very reactive as humans, right? We do things after it actually occurs. It's sort of the classic analogy is, after a breakup, someone says, "Okay, I'll take out the trash."
Yeah, I should have not done that.
I should have done, all the 50 things that, because you didn't recognize it during when the relationship was actually occurring.
Right.
That's just a symptom of how we collectively as humans are. We're very reactive. We're not proactive. We don't think in advance. So, as you mentioned, with meteorology, that's how people are forced to think in advance. You see the forecast every day, right? You turn on the TV, or you go on the internet, or you open your app, and you can see what's going to happen over the next 5 days. In theory, the joke is that it can be wrong, but actually, for the most part,
it's getting pretty accurate.
Yeah, they're more right than wrong. So right, so yeah. So if you think about it, decades ago, a hurricane would just happen, right? You're somewhere and it's just like, oh my goodness, a hurricane's happening. But now, like you said, there's advance notice. You know that it's actually out there. Like there's a storm brewing out somewhere in the Atlantic, and it's picking up steam, and it's moving towards the Gulf Coast or something like that. In advance. That is a big difference. That's a big difference in terms of lives saved and destruction saved and those things like that.
So what's your take about these and the fire? Because, of course, the fire, you can predict if the weather is dry, if there has been, I was listening actually today on NPR on how, yes, there's been a lot more wet environment here in California. but it also means more vegetation. So by the time that it dries, there may actually be more risk. So you don't think that way. You're like, oh, with all the water, with all the rain that we had, and then all of a sudden, it may have the opposite result. But when the fire happened, I mean, obviously, from what I was following there, and you might have been following more than me, it's that, for example, they were talking about there is a very complex alarm system, like sirens and stuff in the island, and they didn't go on. And I don't know. They're looking now why, the reason for it. But I have a feeling that even if, how much would have helped? You don't have those 5 days ahead that you know that the hurricane is coming to Naples, Florida. I used to live there, so I just use that as an example. Mm-hmm. So I have a feeling that there are certain things that the only thing you have available is to be reactive.
Potentially. But I do think that there is more information that can actually come out. So, I mean, if you ask people, if you started mentioning the word, wildfires in Maui, maybe about a month and a half ago, I'm not sure how many people would have made that association, right? So people think of Northern California, they think of Southern California because it's already happened there. They think of Canada because it's already happened there. Now people are going to start associating wildfires with Maui because it's happened. But before that, how much talk was there about it? Because we do know that wildfire risk increases, through time, because the more there's drier underbrush, the more that this can be related to like warmer winters, longer kind of dry season, longer warm season, those things like that. So there's not necessarily a guarantee that you'll sit there and say, okay, you can predict to a T that there's going to be a wildfire here or there, but you can always use more information. And then you have to ask yourself, what are some of the indirect signs of that something's actually going on? And so, there's been creativity in terms of that in some health fields. Like, for instance, people will use what's called syndromic surveillance to help identify if there is some type of outbreak of some infectious disease. And syndromic surveillance is a term that's used to describe a syndrome of things, not a specific disease, not a specific pathogen, but you have a syndrome. Like, for instance, you have like a syndrome that is like flu-like illness. You have respiratory diseases, respiratory symptoms. You have cough, maybe shortness of breath, like fever, congestion, those things like that. That could be so many different things. So that happens all the time. But syndromic surveillance is where they kind of survey and say, okay, typically we in the ER, we have this many people coming because they have respiratory symptoms. But then there's a bump. And that bump is going above normal. And it's a sustained bump. Well, that tells people that you might want to investigate that more closely because that's unusual. Something else is going on. That's not what you would normally expect around this time of the year. So, for instance, I remember, if you go to, for instance, the Taiwan CDC, they have these monitors up there, and then they have these syndromic surveillance algorithms where the monitors show each of the different emissions that are going on in all the different hospitals. They have a really very well done EHR and health records there and those things like that. So they do that, and then they immediately know, look, there's a bump. That requires further investigation. So that's a way of sort of an indirect measure that something might be going on. So that's another way to think about these things when it comes to, say, wildfires and those things. What are some of the indirect measures that might give you a tip-off that you need to look more closely? We don't know yet, but we shouldn't rule out that possibility. So
you would think it's connected to, again, dry weather, dry vegetation. But then the problem is that unless I don't know about somebody very powerful that can create out of the blue a hurricane or storm, Well, some people may have other beliefs than me, so they may say, yes, there is one. But for the fire, you have that idiot that go and throw a lighter or a match or a cigarette, or even worse, and make it on purpose that the fire start. So you can predict as much as you want there, but then there is the human factor, which is kind of like something that makes me think about the things that we do on purpose and the things that we do because we just don't think about it. Like maybe plastic in the body. I don't know. Has there ever been plastic a good idea? I don't know.
Yeah, you typically don't want plastic inside you. That's usually a good general rule. Like
what I'm saying is, could have we predicted that wasn't like, I don't know. I mean, I know it was a great invention, but let's define great invention. I mean,
yeah. So the question you asked is interesting because it's an interesting question that's always asked in surveillance, in biosurveillance. So some of our work has crossed the area of biosurveillance, where you're trying to look for different events that may occur and try to predict what may happen and prepare what will happen. You're essentially doing surveillance over many different factors. And it's absolutely true that there are random stochastic events that occur that you cannot necessarily predict. But you'll find in many situations, in many systems, these random events can occur in some systems and nothing happens, but in other systems, something does happen. So you also have to have a lot of this, kind of preconditions. Things have to be seeded, right? So it's similar, like, you can take 10 different people and the same random event happens to each of those 10 different people, and they're going to react differently and different things will happen, right? Why are there some people that can handle really tough, bad situations better than others, even though it's unpredictable? And so we found in many situations that it's a lot of those underlying circumstances that will then determine what will happen with a stochastic event. So if, for instance, so you mentioned some of the things, someone drops a lighter, someone starts a fire, someone, or there's also lightning strikes, right? Lightning comes down and starts burning things. But that happens. Those things happen in many different places, in many different times. But there's some places where it becomes a full-blown wildfire. Some places it's more containable. So what is that difference? Again, that's not necessarily going to predict everything. And yes, there is stochasticity, just like, there's unfortunate people who do everything right and then things just don't work out. But it tilts the table a little bit, right? It gives us a better sense of maybe we can do something about it. Maybe we can anticipate this better. The pandemic is an example. There's always these jumps of viruses from other animals, potentially to humans, that you worry about, right? So can we get better at doing surveillance of those things so we can better anticipate and contain a jump of a deadly virus? These are just questions that we and that probably need to be addressed more, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, no, I see your point. I mean, when you look at this stochastic or random act or something that happened, you go to the numbers. Like, so I'm thinking cybersecurity right now, or security in general. You're never going to be 100% safe, right? But what is that comfort level that say, well, I'm doing enough. I'm spending enough money to defend my company. I'm spending enough money to defend my environment and myself, but I can't avoid everything. Yep. Even if you just stay in bed in the morning, you're still not safe 100%.
True. So, yes. If you were to try to protect yourself 100%, say wrap yourself in layers of bubble wrap, stay home.
You're killing yourself.
Watch Netflix all day and do nothing but that. You're actually hurting yourself, right? You'd lose muscle mass. You would, you'd not having human contact. You probably wouldn't eat very well. You wouldn't get exercise. Yeah. So absolutely. So yeah, it is a balance. It's true. But information is helpful, right? So you don't have to act on all information, but the question is, are we getting enough information? And are we getting from unique different sources and places? So, we're in a sort of society where there's so much surveillance that's going on when it comes to like apps and websites, right? People are collecting data all the time on people. So you get those, recommendations on YouTube. Like, I can't remember if I related the story, but I remember one time I had to write an article for Forbes about farts.
Oh yeah, you told us last time, actually.
I mentioned that last time. So
and then there was an inference that they thought that you were interested in that.
So just like farts can occur multiple times, I'm telling the story multiple times. But so they anticipated that this is obviously what you like. You obviously like animals farting. So it's similar. It's already happening. But the question is, is it really happening in areas where additional information could actually be a lot more valuable? We can always choose to disregard the information. Another thing, as another example, I remember prior to the Indian Ocean tsunami that occurred a number of years ago, which was devastating, it devastated many parts of Thailand and Indonesia, etc. There were reports of animals prior to this tsunami hitting migrating to higher land, right? So some people wondered, did they sense something? Did they sense a change in pressure or something of that sort? So can they anticipate something that's going to happen before it actually happens? So if, for instance, you were to gather information on what's happening in animals, maybe that would be some advance warning. Maybe it'll tell you nothing. But maybe it will give you some advance warning. So I think these are things that it's helpful for us to look at more closely, because they're doing that already in areas in like social media. They're collecting data on people and saying, is this useful? Maybe not, right? So why not do the same thing in health, environmental health, in those areas? I think some of it's being done, but not nearly enough.
I love this, and I think that's great to get the last few minutes and close on this, because as you're explaining that about the animal moving it towards higher ground, I connected to when you were talking about the monitoring in Taiwan of the health system. You see a bump, you see something unusual. You're like, okay, something's going on here, because you have enough data to know that what is your level. I mean, and we can talk about wearables next time. And I would love to talk about that kind of technology and healthcare. But it kind of gives you what is your normal state, right? If I run with this, I know my heartbeat gets better if I'm trained. If I don't train for a little bit, I get my night. Maybe it's rest heartbeat. It's not as good. So I have a reference. So as I have it as an individual in medical, and you can look back at, every year that you do your yearly test, you can go back and say, okay, this is my normal. This is my cholesterol. This is my, whatever you're looking at. And if something is off, you're like, all right, let's do more tests. So it's kind of like a system that we are already using.
Yep.
But is your point, we're not using it enough now that we do have more data, more computational capacity, and we're probably going to have even more and more. So what needs to change? I mean, I think it would be a great idea if we could monitor about everything, not spy, monitor our environment and say, hey, something's not really working, because again, why are all these whales coming and dying on the coast? It's not a mass suicide. Maybe it is. I don't know, but something is happening. Can we investigate?
Yeah, absolutely. You've heard of these stories from ancient times too, where people talk about some type of herald or something they see in advance that appears, or a certain bird that appears, or what have you. And of course, some of this is some of it's folklore, but some of it is actually based on reality. You can actually see things in advance happen. And you mentioned some of these things, these events, these random events that seem to occur. You in the news about, okay, maybe there's more animals appearing somewhere, or washing ashore, or you see animals where you didn't see them before. What does that mean? And there's just not enough of things connecting this. When it comes to climate change, we just see all these stories, and people are saying warning, warning, warning. Of course, overall, from a global standpoint, there's warnings, but also we need to know what's happening sort of at a local level as well, and how are all of these things connected. It is remarkable the number of times when something happens, and something bad happens or a disaster happens. Either something bad happens in your personal life, or something happens at a larger scale, and then you walk backwards and you say, "What led to this?" And then
those were the signs.
Sometimes you'd sit back and just say, "Oh, that's right." I was talking to a friend the other day about relationships, and we were talking about someone's relationship that didn't work out, and all the signs were there very early on, but the person got blindsided, right? And so that just happens so many times. And so we as humans, we've proved over and over again, we don't see the signs. We don't see the signs because can't connect it. So why not try to connect these things?
I think that's the lesson, especially now that we can monitor all these things. And I think the job that you guys do, and then other in the industry are doing in academic level. I mean, again, all that risk assessment and other things. It's incredible. But you know what? As my grandfather used to say, there is no worse deaf than those that don't want to listen. So
that's a good saying. Grandfather's the wise person.
A lot of old farmers' way to say things that I still think about sometimes, and I'm like, there wasn't much of a technology of study, but it's so much common sense, and I think that's what we're lacking. We need I want to invent a common sense ChatGPT, where if you are stupid, it just alert. There is a bump on the road. I think there'll be a constant spike wherever we do. Anyway, Bruce, great chatting with you again. We always go the extra 10 minutes because, we can talk about a lot of things. I hope, again, that our listeners are enjoying our rambling. And I want to invite again, if there is something that you are interested. I mean, Bruce, it's an expert in a lot of things, and also I know him personally as a humble person that probably will welcome, as well as myself, to get some tips and topics and answer some questions. If you want to leave it down in the comments on our social media, which you can find on the notes for the podcast, and we'll meet again in about a month for a podcast. Probably we'll meet in person before that, but I don't think we're going to record a podcast on that occasion. So, Bruce, thank you so much again for a great conversation.
As always, Marco. Likewise.
All right. Bye, everybody. Stay tuned, subscribe, and tell your friends. Maybe they like what we talk about. See ya.
Devo unlocks the full value of machine data for the world's most instrumented enterprises. The Devo Data Analytics Platform addresses the explosion in volume of machine data and the crushing demands of algorithms and automation. Learn more at devo.com. BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com. Black Cloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high net worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impacts of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Society, hosted by Marco Ciappelli. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then add this show to your favorite podcast player, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network with your friends, family, and colleagues. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.